it turned on?
Good morning.
Morning.
Okay. How's the week been?
Short.
Way too warm. Oh man, it's hard to go outside and work in temperatures like this. I've been gone for a few weeks over to YD, our Young Disciple summer camp over in Eastern Washington, and it was even hotter over there, so it actually felt good to get back on this side of the mountains. But since we don't have our person to start out with prayer, is there anything that we need to remember in prayer today, this morning? There's always something. Yes?
My wife Carol's pain's way up today, so just for the
Okay.
pain.
So, for Caleb, Jerry had sent up. Jerry?
Yeah, for my daughter to find an employment and a place to stay.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Okay, stuff.
Let's just begin our lesson study with a word of prayer. Father in heaven, we ask for you to come be with us this morning, come into our thoughts, our hearts, our minds, and the few people that we have mentioned this morning, we just ask that you would come be with them. And Lord, you said in your word that all things will work together for them that love you. We just ask that our hearts would be true and faithful. We want to ask for our children and our friends and our family that are here today for whatever reason, Lord. Go and find them as well and touch their hearts and give them strength. As we open up your word, open up our hearts and minds to hear what you have to say to us today. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay. So, what's the lesson this week? Lesson number 5. So far this quarter, our lesson has been about being in a crucible. We started off the quarter's lesson with that idea of a crucible is for what purpose? Refining. By nature, a crucible is a container that you put in under extreme heat, and it is designed and made to hold up under that heat so that whatever you put in it can be purified or distilled or coupled or in some way go through some chemical transition. Years ago I was working at an environmental testing lab down in Kelso, and I wanted to purify some gold that I got off some electronic parts, and so I did the isolation the way I was supposed to, and I didn't want to spend the money to get a good crucible to put in the oven, because the oven needed to go up to, what is the melting point of gold? I think it's like 1800 degrees, which is pretty hot. So I used one of the crucibles that we had, crucibles that we had in the lab. So I put my stuff in there and put it in the oven and let it go. And it was fine until I turned the oven off and let it cool down, and it just completely broke. that particular crucible wasn't designed to handle the temperatures that I needed. So it kind of taught me a lesson about taking shortcuts. Don't take shortcuts. And I kind of think that that idea is buried in the lesson as well. So our lesson starts off with this idea of, the lesson title is Extreme Heat. So this week's lesson, we're going to look at some extreme examples of trial and where is God when we're in trial, and where are we? What are we doing? How are we reacting to this trial? So how do we look at this?
Ron?
Yeah.
You know, I don't think before I looked at these lessons that I thought of much of life as being a test of my character.
Okay, yeah.
And yet, that's pretty much sums it up.
That is the whole
Of the sum,
of life, is to test your character.
in preparation for the life you're in.
Right. And the interesting thing is, now that you say that, is number one, tests reveal our character
And flaws.
and flaws. Yeah.
It shows how we behave, good or bad. So God is testing us. So if He balance the scale, like good or bad. If we're okay. If we're bad here,
Yeah.
and bad here, good here. That's not good. But if we're like this, and we pass, it got made.
So the nice thing with this whole thing of testing, and how many of you like had some crazy thing happen, and then the way you react shocks you? I can't believe what I just did. I mean, it just like came out of nowhere. Well, no, it didn't come out of nowhere. It came down in here, right? It's like I have things down in that basement that I want to keep in the dark. But the nice thing is, the redemptive thing is that trial isn't meant to show us, number one, who you really are, and just get over it. You're that way for the rest of your life. No, it's okay, this is what I'm really like. This is the direction I want to go, to get as far away from what I'm really like as possible. How do we change and remelt or refine our characters so that the next time that test comes along, it's not going to have that death grip on us. So our first story is on Sunday's lesson, and it is found in Genesis 22. And if you remember, we talked about Genesis 22 not too many months ago, did we? Genesis was our last lesson study. So what's happening in Genesis 22? So it is definitely a test. So the interesting thing is, if you go back in Genesis, just kind of all the way back in Genesis, the story of Abraham goes clear back to Genesis 12. So from 12 to 22, all those chapters are a build-up in Abraham's life And one of the primary themes through that buildup is he doesn't have children. So his first thought is, what?
You know, the span of that time is what, 25 years? From Haran.
Yeah, the discussions about being child was started when he was 75, right?
Something
I
like
believe
that.
so. Mhm.
I think he was 70 when he left Haran.
So, there to 100 years old, Isaac is born. By the time we get to chapter 22, Isaac is, how old do we think Isaac is in
Well, he was
chapter
40 when he got married.
20?
Ellen White says that Abraham was 120.
Okay, so here we are, Abraham, 120, Isaac is nearly a grown man at this point.
I would say 20.
So, it's interesting. How does it come up as just the first couple of verses there? Now it comes to pass after these things that God tested Abraham and said to him, Abraham, he said, here I am. He said, take now your son, your only son Isaac. So how many, I guess my point is, for decades this story had been building. Take now your son, your only son, Isaac. And did God stop there? No. Who you love. And go to the land of Moriah and offer him a burnt offering. What kind of a test was that? Give up the very thing that your whole life and story has been about for decades. And now it's here, and it's reaching the pinnacle of success. And now take it away.
Ellen White says it was the most trying test for Abraham. The most trying.
Yes. So yeah, in the lesson, the quote from Patriarchs and Prophets is, God had reserved his last, most trying test for Abraham until the burden of years was heavy upon him and he longed for rest. Okay, so what do you hear in that? Because there's two parts of this that the human mind tends to go. God waited for this one test, the most powerful, extreme test, until when? Does it say?
He was 100.
He was old and what?
Long for rest.
Anyone, rest.
Someone explain to me what burden of years is.
And
Oh, you know what the burden of years is.
the burden. Yeah. Okay. So yeah,
I'm serious.
burden of years, and he longed for rest. What does that mean? That's
Well, the
a
burden of
phrase.
years would be like he waited so long. I mean, he waited and was patient. We try to be patient. Kind of feel old and all that. But no, it's if you wait for something, I find the burden of my children. I want them to be saved, and I have to sacrifice and give to God. I have to just esteem them almost as dead, so that God can save them. It's interesting.
The older we are, the more burden of years we have.
What was that?
The older we are, the more burden of years we have.
Yeah, and also you kind of hope your kids will be there. You know, I mean, they're supposed to be there for the support of their parents as they age too.
So that.
I think sometimes we don't define that.
I
We just
agree.
kind of gloss over it.
I agree.
So that comment, the burden of years was heavy upon him. I guess what I'm thinking is, what happens to our energy as we get older?
Where is that?
It's shorter. Yeah, less of it.
We wear out, aches and pains, and all these other things coming, that come upon us, and life just,
Disintegration.
yeah,
Wrong.
life gets tired.
If,
Yeah.
when we get older, a lot of our body parts and our body wear out. As it's like the drum brakes of a truck. They'll last so long when you start using them, and they wear out. That's why you're putting the brakes in.
So wearing out, and he longed for rest. What does that phrase right there mean? He longed for rest. Does that mean sitting back in the shade and having a cold glass of ice water? What is that phrase? He longed for rest.
He's waiting to die?
Yeah, that's what it was. He was tired.
He enjoyed downtime.
And, he was looking for the peace.
But he lived 55 years.
Oh, yes. You took my punchline. But yeah, if you stop and look at the story, he's going to live for another 50 plus years and have 6 more children, sons. Because, I think especially because he showed himself at his hardest. And imagine God saying, okay, I'm giving this test to Abraham, I'm giving this test to you guys, not when you're young and you have the mental and physical fortitude to overcome temptation, but I'm going to wait till you are beat down. Not because I'm some sort of mercenary, not because I'm cynical or mean or vindictive, but I'm waiting because I want to prove to all the universe that my servant, Abraham, I know his mettle. And I'm gonna wait until he's weary, he's ready for the grave. And then I'm gonna give him a trial that just would scald the mind off of almost everybody else. Because I know that's when my glory will shine the greatest. When he is an old man, will do this thing unflinching. And he will demonstrate true loyalty.
So we're saying in a way that Abraham and Job and all of us have some things in common.
Like
Because
what?
we are the theater of the universe.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So the lesson just starts off.
That's okay.
The lesson starts with this question: why did God ask Abraham to make a sacrifice? So let's kind of broaden this as to this question: why? Why did God ask him to do it? To test him.
It says here that also that he would understand the agony that God went through when he sacrificed his own son.
Yeah. The not crazy, but the interesting thing about the story of Abraham, the Bible actually goes into very little detail about Abraham's relationship with God. It brings up just a little bit that Abraham walked with God. But it doesn't expound on this relationship was really close. There were mistakes that Abraham made, and he wound up, what was it? The burden of years was heavy upon him because of those mistakes that he made periodically throughout his life. But he truly was a man who walked with God. They were close. Abraham understood the plan of salvation and the gospel. He understood what was coming. Yeah.
Yeah, and through that, he saw, because of the agony, I was just thinking of this, that because of the agony he experienced, and therefore what God experienced, he could see just how much God loved us, that he was willing to do that.
Yeah.
So he could, that was, to me, that would be the foundation of what he would tell God. It's like, no, God will do anything for you. He loves you so much that he will do this. He is willing to agonize for you.
So, yeah, and as you're saying that, kind of, let's So God asked this trial of Abraham to test him, but think about this. It gave Abraham a whole new understanding of what God was going to do for us. And what better thing for Abraham to really understand, because Abraham was going to be the father of who?
Isaac.
Isaac, and then? Many nations. His generation, God says what? Your children will be as the stars of heaven. So the whole nucleus begins here, and God gives Abraham a glimpse as to this bigger picture. He says, now teach this to your children. Yeah.
There's a sentence in Patriarchs and Prophets that, you ask why God tested him, and it says that he might reach the highest standard. God subjected him to another test, the closest which man was ever called to endure.
Wow, yeah.
There's a difference between our mental knowledge and our emotional experience. And I think that's what we're talking about here.
We can know a lot of things, but have little practical experience. So that when something like trial comes to our life, we still don't know how to deal with it. Because we haven't trained. Yes, Dennis.
The story I see is being there, not for Abraham, but for me. So that I know how to respond when things go bad in my life.
So the test wasn't just for him.
No.
It was for us as well.
And how do we pass the test? Do we still love God when something we really want and we believe is good and God says no?
Do we compromise because of our children? Oh. Do we? That's a little bit heavier of a thought. Because we love our children, do we
Compromise.
live in?
Compromise. What is that word? What does that mean?
That's a good word, compromise. Let's go on, Monday's lesson.
Oh,
Turn.
yeah. It's a new word.
Turn to the book
Thank you.
of Hosea. We'll jump to another story here, the book of Hosea, right after Daniel. So, Hosea 2, verses 1 to 12. So the story of Hosea, just for a backdrop, is about the prophet Hosea. What was the background of Hosea's life story? How does the book of Hosea start?
He lived during the time of a few different kings
Okay.
of Judah.
And God said to Hosea, go do what?
Something that most other people.
I moved to this. I like this.
Go to the bad part of town and find a wife. A whore. Marry a prostitute. Bring her home, take care of her.
Someone say hi.
And why did God ask Hosea to do this?
Because the harlot represented his own people.
Amen.
Imagine, okay, so this is actually so brilliant, because you think about this thing called gossip. How many of you have heard gossip before in your life ever? Okay. Yeah, all of us.
I found a word.
Imagine a prophet Everybody knows he's a prophet.
He's supposed to be a holy man of God.
He's a holy man of God. I mean, just walking through that part of town is going to give him rumors that are going to go like wildfire across whatever town it is, right? But no, he doesn't just go walk through that part of town. He actually goes, starts dating, invites a woman home, and you see what I'm saying? Imagine the blistering rumors that just went like wildfire. What's the phrase? A rumor goes around the world 3 times before truth puts its boots on, or something like that. Imagine the rumors that went. And God is saying, yes, at this point in time, these rumors are necessary. Why? Because everybody is talking about this. Can you believe what Hosea is doing? And then shortly thereafter, Hosea has a message. And what's the message? Oh, by the way, all of you have been doing the same thing to me, God says. So it was kind of like God set them up. Remember the story of when Jesus went way out of his way to heal the Syrophoenician's daughter? What was the response of the disciples?
They wanted to send her away.
Oh, get her away. She's heathen. And Jesus kind of appeared to play into that when he told the woman, hey, it's not proper to do what? Give
the children's bread.
Give the children's food to the dogs. I mean, that sounds bad. Okay, there's 2 reasons why Jesus said that. Number 1, he's baiting the disciples to reveal their true colors down inside. So that's their task. And on the other side, he knows this woman has the faith to keep asking. So he's encouraging her to push through it, this stereotype of the Jews. So he's drawing her. He's also showing the disciples how terrible their attitude is. And then he can say, aha. And he blesses the woman. He heals the daughter. And what do you think the disciples were thinking about all the way home? I am so rotten. I can't believe. If they started to get, he's here to help everybody. I can't believe I said that. And so I think God is doing the same thing here in Hosea. But let's come to chapter 2. So the questions are, what methods does God say that he will use to pull Israel back to himself? Okay, so this is a story about, in chapter 2, Hosea and his wife, Gomer. But the bigger picture is, it's a story of what? God and his people. Okay. So, what is in those 12 verses? I'll start with verse 2 and 3. So, what is God doing in verse 2 and 3? If somebody would like to read those 2 verses.
Chapter
2. Hosea 2, verse 2 and 3.
Bring charges against your mother. Bring charges, for she is not my wife, nor am I her husband. Let her put away her harlotries from her sight, and her adulteries from between her breasts, lest I strip her naked and expose her as in the day she was born, and make her like a wilderness, and set her like a dry land, and slay her with thirst.
Okay, wow. That sounds pretty rough, but is God talking to Gomer at this point? No, who is he talking to? So, if he were to say it plainer, if he would address the church, how would it sound? What message is God giving to his church?
You've left me for other gods.
You left me for other gods. How do God's people commit adultery? So this is in a spiritual context here. How does that work? like to dwell on to the exclusion of God? Whether it's time or money or whatever. It's easy to spend all day doing something, and then at the end of the day, is it difficult to pull out your Bible and read for 10, 15, 20 minutes, an hour? Or is it like, so, spiritual adultery, when we serve other gods. How about this one? That church out there is growing unbelievably. How are they doing it? Let's get a couple people together and let's go over to that church and see what are their methods, what are their ways, how are they growing so much? We want to grow like that. Talk to me. Is that spiritual adultery? When we go to another faith to gain our methods for growth.
Uncompromised or compromised principles can cause all kinds of problems. You take Abraham and Ishmael, which was a compromise.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And there are things, unfortunately, that I'm going to use the term that may sound weird, but we play politics with our religion, which we should not do.
Yeah.
Because the issue of politics is the art of compromise.
The very definition of the word politics. What's the root of that word?
I don't know what to do.
To poll.
So,
What does the word to poll mean?
I don't understand.
To gain opinion.
To gain opinions. So I'm looking for the most popular opinion to do XYZ. Yes, how good of a guide is that to faith? It's crazy. It's absurd. But, like you mentioned, Abraham was faced with a choice. Sarah over here, she was past the age of having children. So it just can't happen. So, well, I know, Hagar, this still works over here. Let's do this. But how many times, spiritually, coming back to Hosea, how many times do we say, if we preach the love of God through the three angels' message and the message of the sanctuary and all of the intricate, beautiful detail of what Christ did in the sanctuary, it should be beautiful to us. And it should help us understand, because that's why God gave the sanctuary service, right? So that even children could understand it. And what if we say, that doesn't work anymore to preach like that stuff. We need to preach this over here. It's more successful. Video for the kids. That'll bring, it's more, it's more relevant. It's politically correct.
Then what is the value of something that is to be everlasting?
What do you mean?
Well, then why is it called the everlasting gospel?
If the heart of man has never changed, there's nothing new under the sun, has our need changed in the last 100 years?
No.
It hasn't. Gee.
I'll always remember Pauline telling me, don't compromise truth. Except to be firm.
But yet how often we're told, and I understand there's a practical dimension to life here, I get that. But how many times do we want to turn and go off in a direction to get children, spiritually, to bring people to church, at the expense of, God says, no, the everlasting gospel, the sanctuary message, this is the day of atonement. This is our message, the three angels' message. Fear God, give glory to Him. And let's get into that. Do we make that compromise? Let's go on a couple of verses in Hosea. Yes. Oh, sorry.
We can make a statement with the truth is very, very important, but sometimes we get into tradition and say, well, this is tradition, this is the truth. Yes, it is truth, but maybe this is truth also. And there's perspective to some of this. And as long as we're stating the truth, we don't have to necessarily stay with tradition. I mean,
so
I'm saying, if we all dress like we used to 150 years ago, we would really stand out, but we're not supposed to do that.
right. So yes, there is that practical element of being in the world and not of the world, but that being able to be mature enough, as Paul says, to eat the meat of God's Word and understand how to pull out the principle of the message, it's always going to be practical and is always going to appeal to a heart that wants to know more. Let's go on. In Hosea's story, verses, where did we end? 3?
3.
Verses 5 to 7. Somebody like to read 5 to 7?
Say it 3 times.
Yep. 2. Hosea 2. 5 to 7. Yes.
5 to
The
7.
mother hath played the harlot. She hath deceived them, hath them shamefully. For she said, I will go after my lovers that give me my bread and my water, my wool, my flax, and my oil, and my drink. Therefore, behold, I will hedge up thy way with thorns, and make a wall, that she shall not find her paths. And she shall follow after her lovers, but she shall not overtake them. And she shall seek them, but shall not find them. Then shall she say, I will go and return to my first husband, for then was it better for me then than now.
Okay. If we were to look at this story and take out the she and her and put in the word church, which is a word for all of us, what would that be saying? So Hosea's wife, what is her thinking in verse 5? She's played the harlot, she's conceived, she has children. When God's church goes... Okay, so what was the motivation in verse 5? Who gives me my bread and my water, my wool, my linen. Okay, so what is the church goer talking? What's she talking about? What's her motivation for what she is doing in life?
She's rebellious.
Okay, she's what?
She's rebellious.
Okay, what is she looking for here? What was it you said?
Just the world's giving her more than what she considers God.
So she's looking for sustenance: bread, water, wool, linen, oil, and drink. So she's looking for the successes of life.
And I would say, even if she was looking for food and shelter and warmth, those are 3 basics. Okay. I mean, I know they're naming it as oil and flax and linen and, these other things, but
I think the camera's picking up the sound.
So she goes and she conceives. She's bringing children into this world, but as a church, are we bringing half-hearted Christians into the church? I mean, into the world. Do you kind of see what I'm saying? I mean, I'm trying to turn this so as I read it, I'm reading, am I kind of doing the same thing? Are my principles that I live by, are they creating compromise? So the people that I have opportunity to influence. Am I providing them the best glimpse of God's love, His justice, and the whole picture? Am I doing that, or am I creating imbalanced people because I'm imbalanced?
I did, it was me. If you're not preaching repentance, which is the law of God, unto baptism, you're just bringing people in for the show. You're not bringing them in to look in their hearts and change their hearts. And that's really the bottom issue of all of it, and that's how we become sober Christians, is by our continual repentance through the blood of the Lamb and our continual growth.
So in this verse, she's bringing children in. Her motivation is the bread, the water, the wool, the linen. Could that be a prosperity mentality?
Exactly. And our prosperity church is out preaching that all the time.
If you do X, Y, Z, you will grow. And you'll get big. You just have to do, yes, and we've seen the program.
We could be a mega church.
We could. We'd have to just build a bigger church. Wow, we could have all these people, but wait a minute, where's the heart of the gospel? The thing that touches the hearts, that brings conviction, deep conviction. Let's go on. Verse 10. Somebody like to read verse 10?
And now will I discover her lewdness in the sight of her lovers, and none shall deliver her out of my hand.
Okay, so what is God saying here? And why is this important? God is saying, and now I will discover, that's Old English phrasing. How would we say that today? And now I will expose her lewdness in the sight of those she's interacting with, and none shall deliver her out of my hand. So, again, this is an analogy. This is kind of a parable. Who's the her? The church.
The mother church.
Could this be me as an individual? So if I stubbornly choose to go my own way and present the gospel as I think it should be presented, in ways that God says, I never really asked you to do things like that. God is saying, now I will, what was the word that Larry said? Expose. Now I will expose her in everybody's sight. How many times have we seen over the last 20, 30 years, whatever, these big mega churches, the leaders are now in jail because of the political and the corruption. What's the word? What is the word when you misuse money? Embezzlement. You take the money, misuse it. Misappropriation. And it becomes a snare. Yeah.
You know, in the New King James it says, now I will uncover her lewdness in the sight of the lovers.
I will show everybody what they've been doing.
Yeah. And so it's interesting, there's two words here that stick out to me. One is to uncover, the other is lewdness.
Let's go to the next one down.
So this appears to be a public type thing in this verse, as I'm reading here on the screen. Is there a redemptive purpose that God has for sometimes showing the world what I've been up to?
Rob, it's interesting. I'm reading one of the that says, you know, that was done that many may fear. And, you know, I'm paraphrasing, do what's right.
Well, there are biblical examples too, wasn't there?
Oh,
Of public exposure, not to punish and shame. What was the whole main purpose?
Correct. That just is all.
Correction. There were many of their stories where she made that public rebuke, and it hardened the people and they left the church. The other half, they realized only then that, wow, yeah, I have been rotten. I can't believe I've been doing all this, and I didn't even realize it. I didn't think it through. And there really was heartfelt public confession and a total turning of direction. And if it wouldn't have been for that. So there is there a time and place for God to expose us so that we can see what's been going on? I mean,
Abraham doubt in other things, and kindness, and other.
even him. Let's go on. Let's turn to the book of Job. So back to Job. So switch gears to another story. The reading is a little bit more than we can cover in class, but do we all know the story of Job? What happens? Satan comes as representative of earth. God asks him, where do you come from? I come from earth, walking up and down and to and fro in the earth. And if we look at verse 8, somebody read verse 8 for us.
Then the Lord said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job, that there is none like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man, one who fears God and shuns evil?
This is kind of awesome if you think about it. So, again, there's some Old English in here. What did Satan, in verse 7, tell God? When God asked, where do you come from? So Satan answered. Go back to verse 7. What do you hear in Satan's voice when he responds to God? Where are you from? Now what does Satan say?
It's a rather arrogant comment he makes. From going to and fro on the earth and from walking back and forth on it.
So what does he convey?
He's checking out his domain.
It's almost like he's taunting God. Or
Yeah.
Christ. Yeah.
Where am I from? I'm from Earth, and so what does that all embody? Walking to and fro, going up and down.
Checking out his domain.
I'm in full control of my domain, thank you. Can you hear the sarcasm, maybe the headiness of?
I'm busily destroying your children.
Oh, wow, that's sharp, isn't it?
Yeah, the pinnacle of your creation.
I'm busy with your children. That's what I'm doing. And then look how God responds. Oh, have you considered my servant Job? Now, what does God specifically say about Job? Verse 8. Can you imagine when God says of this person, there is nobody on planet Earth like him? When God says that about you. See, again, we're not told about Job's, really, the inside, the relationship that he had with God. And God is saying, have you considered, to this army general enemy of his, have you considered my servant? He's blameless and upright, one who fears God and shuns evil. So here's a guy who loves God supremely and turns from evil at every exposure. Why is that such a big deal? Because it's flying in the very face of what Satan just said, right? Not so fast, Satan. I've got a guy down here. There's nobody on earth that is his rival, but look at him. In the middle of that mayhem down on earth, he's faithful to me at every point. And so we know the conversation that happens. So Satan comes back with, well, of course he loves and fears you. You've protected him. And so we see this train of events. Everything gets taken away from him. And Job is put through a trial. How many of you have lost children? That puts burden to your ears, doesn't it? I mean, that really sucks the wind out of your sail. But imagine losing 10, all at the same time.
I can imagine losing children, but the real kicker for me is the fact not only did he lose his children, and of course it's hard on his wife, but then Jesus just cursed God and died.
Yeah. So your closest companion does what for your psyche?
Total desertion.
She just lost kids. I mean, she was.
Yeah, and no doubt it was a tremendous.
I mean, whenever I hear that, I heard the preacher say that once, and it helped me because, like, oh yeah, okay. I don't know what she's experienced, but she's lost all her kids, and the mother's heart was grieving. Still, what she said, I wouldn't support it. You know, God died is not a good thing.
No, it's definitely not a good thing.
Yeah.
There's a lot of strength.
No doubt there is an enormous amount of information that we're not getting in the book of Job. Because God had to have been working with Mrs. Job. And there's a big picture that we'll know in the end that the Lord had everything. He was working on all levels, for her heart as well as Job's heart. But we're just getting his story at the moment.
What I think is interesting with this is parallel to what Scripture teaches about is that she wasn't protected from the onslaught of him being attacked by Satan. She had to suffer the same consequence her husband suffered. She obviously didn't triumph over it, but, and that's what women are called to be strong and to be fearless, to fear not when we're under these kind of persecutions. So, she suffered, she had to go right through the same fire that he went through.
She did.
Blood flesh.
Because when Job lost what was the first thing? The sheep and
Lost all his livestock.
So the livestock, the oxen and the donkeys, and then all the sheep, and then all the camels, and then all the children. So this, I mean, that's everything. Even the servants, except the few servants that escaped to come back and give him the message. So not only did Job lose it, Mrs. Job lost it all too. And
Would we, in today's society, would we consider that bankruptcy?
We lost everything.
It could have been by fire, it could have been by anything, but it's gone.
He also lost his standing in the community.
That's true.
so reputation.
But his reputation wasn't damaged, it's just that his substance was gone. And a lot of times with that substance comes influence.
So over the rest of the book, what is the tenor of Job's friends? What is their way of relating to this? How did they interpret this?
Something wrong and you sinned and now you're paying.
Okay, Job, what's your secret? Just confess your secret. Did we know that you, because this doesn't happen just at willy-nilly, Job. You must have some really bad evil going on. Yeah, and they totally miss the point. But how did Job get through it? And yeah, it comes, well, his wife comes in chapter 2, verse 9. Do you still hold fast your integrity? First God had died. What does integrity have to do with not being? So she's equating integrity. What am I trying to say? Is integrity and finding relief mutually exclusive? That's kind of the way she's coming at it, isn't she?
She's more like Lot's wife.
Just give up.
No, she did. She was like Lot's wife. They had to drag him out of the sea by their hands, and she still turned around.
Yeah. So she's saying, just give up your integrity and
The word there is innocence.
the what?
The word is innocence.
Give up your.
In other words, she's saying, quit pretending you're innocent. There must be something here.
Okay. So now she's accusing.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, there's something deep that connects to the very last part of the Proverbs 31 woman. Peculiar little phrase at the very end of the chapter. It says, and her husband is known in the gate. And if you really kind of read into that, because of her support for him, and that nurture and that healing that she provides in the home, he becomes somebody that sits in the gates. And in that society, what is that?
One of the judges.
One of the judges, a man of authority, a man of wisdom. He becomes that sage that then contributes to the whole society.
Well, you can see that in Ruth.
Yes.
Ruth is Moabite. And she comes in and she gives bread
She
and
backs him up.
comfort and support and, to an Asian Israelite. She did what her, generation of people didn't do for the Israelites.
And here, boy, Job really has the rug pulled out under him. Everything's gone. His wife's heart is gone. His friends in the next preceding chapters, they're not standing by him. Job 1:20 and 21. What was Job's response? Yes.
When you lose a child, you're concerned, is that child going to be saved? He lost 10 kids and they were all pardoned. What were they doing? Are all the 10 kids going to be saved? Or that could be awful hard.
Yeah, verse 13.
I know it's hard on me.
Amen.
They were all eating and drinking in their oldest brother's house. They were getting along. They had the best dad in the world. Right?
Yeah.
Even God said so. But yeah, we don't know, but we can imagine, because earlier in the chapter, verse 1 says, Job daily petitioned in sacrifices for his children.
Right.
We just don't know. But in the long run, Job can have 20 children instead of 10. The 10 he lost, and the 10 that the Lord gave him at the end, right?
No, he didn't remarry, as far as we know.
There's no evidence of that, so Yeah, and how many people have we heard that said, well, she should have been the first to go? But, yeah, we just don't know. But we know he lived
Doesn't say she's not.
a long life. Yeah, so we just can't.
Maybe she first got invited.
Oh boy. Yes, okay. Without speculating, let's go on. So, verse 20. Job 1, verse 20. Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I shall return there. The Lord gave, and the Lord is taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Are we preparing for the test when it comes to us that we can say that? Because at some point, all of us, I mean, we've all experienced trial and heartache at some point in time along life, but I can't imagine it's all going to be good from here on out. So what are we doing to prepare to be able to give that kind of answer when we know hard things are going to come?
When we look at chapter 1, verse 22, and you look at that and parallel it with some of the experiences that the children of Israel went through when they tested God, they failed the test. Job did not.
And their tests were so petty.
In comparison to what Job went through, yes. Yes, water is essential. Let's keep that in mind, but still, Job still trusted God.
Yeah. He did. And they wanted to stamp their foot on the ground and throw a fit and turn around and go back to Egypt.
He appeals to his wife in the 10th verse there of chapter 2.
Yeah.
He says, you're speaking foolishness. Wife, you're speaking like the foolish women out there speak. We have believers in God. We have to take this, the good.
If we receive the good, why not the bad?
Yeah.
Yes.
God is in control still.
Yeah. Can we have that attitude when times are rough? God's done marvelous things. He's blessed us so much. And then our house burns down. It's like, okay, He gave it to me. Take it away. Why is it that we immediately go to why, God? Why? How many times have you heard people say, well, why?
So, anytime
Yeah. I mean, who do I think I am?
I think from a human perspective, that's common. I know when my brother died in a car accident in 1972, my dad, for a long time, was asking why.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's bad to ask why, so when you start blaming God, which a lot of people do, it's like, well, this God did this to me. It's like, no, that isn't for the Lord, He did it.
Just realized we've got less than 4 minutes. But so blitzing through Wednesday and Thursday. Wednesday's lesson is 2 Corinthians chapter 1. Paul is recounting, actually first and second, in 2 Corinthians chapter 11, he's telling the Corinthians that he's been beat how many times? 5 times. 40 stripes minus 1. It was considered 40 stripes kills the average man. So let's just give him one less. So what is that basically saying? Beat you within an inch of your life. So we're going to inflict the most pain and punishment on you, but we don't want you to die. Because if you die, then you don't suffer, because it doesn't hurt to be dead, right? But imagine, 5 times, 39 stripes. And then he said, a few times he was beaten with rods. What hurts worse, getting beat with a cane or a whip? I don't know. I think the canes probably break more bones. And then he just goes on. And then all of this has happened to me. And then in chapter 1, Paul is saying, but all of these things happened to me because, why?
love Jesus.
To love Jesus. So that I can be a comfort to you when you go through your trials. And I think that's our takeaway of this whole week's lesson, and that is we go through trials because there are going to be people out there, maybe who we've not even met yet, that our particular heartache, whatever it is, we can say, you know,
Yeah, his mic isn't, it was working.
I've been there. And it cuts, I know. You know, and we can walk next to people and support them. And that's kind of what Paul was saying, was I've gone through this absolute craziness, and I learned to wholeheartedly trust in God and depend on Him for strength. Because if I had nothing else, except die without hope, and that didn't sound like a very good option. He says in Corinthians there how many days were they on the ship? Larry, do you know? How many days were they on the ship in the storm and they just all gave up hope? It's like weeks.
Well, there
wasn't
were
it?
2 weeks without food.
How many of you gone 2 weeks without food? How good does it feel? Yeah, I can imagine that. You're feeling pretty gone by that. Hopeless. After 2 weeks of not eating, your frontal lobe is severely impaired. But Paul said, when there was absolutely no hope, we threw everything out of the ship, and then he said, here, eat a little bit. And then shortly after that, they ran aground. And Paul said, we were all as good as dead, but we threw ourselves on the mercy of God. And He came through. He came through every time, especially that time. And he says, that happened because now I can tell you the trials that you are going through are calculated to drive you away from God. Satan knows how to do that. And he doesn't play nice with God's children. He trips them and then he kicks them while we're down. But that's what Paul is saying to us. As we've experienced, so we walk with others to tell them. Yeah.
And we can trust that God has tempered it because He's in control, right?
Yes.
So he can stop Satan anytime He wants. So what He allows, then we can have confidence to say, no, the Lord has allowed this. There's going to be something good that comes out of it. Even though I'm in a lot of pain, I hate where I'm at right now. Somewhere down the line, there's going to be something good, either for me or for somebody else.
1 Corinthians 10:13 says, God has done what? He's not allowed any trial to come to you that you cannot overcome. Yeah, Ross.
I lean on the comment that when we get to the kingdom and we see the end of the beginning, when all is revealed, we will say we would have had it no other way.
Yeah.
Even with the tribulations, at that point we would recognize we would have it no other way. Praise God.
Yeah. If that was the only way for God to disattach you and your heartstrings from the world that were going to take you down, if that's the only thing that God could have done to cut those strings, yeah. We see how all those pieces fit
As
together.
soon as he's done, I
But
should.
this idea, I just want to leave us with the idea that God does not allow trial to come on us, that we, as He understands the intricacies of our experience, our life, our genetics, our everything that's going on inside the skin, He knows we have the capacity
No, just ended standing.
to pass this trial.
Let's wait till he's done.
He won't let us experience trial beyond our capacity, and we have to rely on that. So the crazier it gets, we have to say, he thinks I can do it. Yeah. He thinks I can do it. You know, and just that fire comes in. Okay, yeah, let's do this. Let's bow our heads for prayer. Lord, most holy Father, please remind us more often, because we're so prone to forget. Give us your strength, your Spirit to bring us this healing so that we will be quick to remember that in you we can do all things. And that we can, like Job, turn from evil and have a distaste for everything that you do not like. Take our will and change it to what you would have it to be. Lord, give us opportunity to just share with others what you have done with us. In Jesus' name.